Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Vanessa and this is Healing with Vanessa. Today I'm going to be reviewing some of the books I've read in January and February. Some of them I listened to, some of them I actually read. Let me know in the comments what your opinion is. Does listening to an audiobook really count as reading? I don't know. I've heard mixed things. In my opinion, I feel like it's half. It's not quite as much mental work as actually sitting down and reading a book. So on my way to work, I love listening to audiobooks, and so I thought I might as well review those as well. I got my little Bar Harbor, Maine mug and I'm sipping on some cinnamon stress relief tea. If you're new to this channel, I'm Vanessa and my channel is mostly centered around living a healthy lifestyle while having an autoimmune disease. I have rheumatoid arthritis, so a lot of the things I have to watch what I eat. I do certain exercises that help with pain relief. I do stretching, foam rolling, ice baths, but I also like to sprinkle in a little bit of book content because it's such a big part of my life and I love watching BookTube, and so why not, give my opinions. If in this video you hear like stomping, moving furniture, it's my annoying upstairs neighbor. We have beef. We've asked her multiple times to please stop stomping and like ferociously moving furniture, but I don't know, as soon as I start to do something, especially filming or like taking a nap, she just automatically starts moving around, and I'm sorry if you hear some of those noises. I will try to edit them out if I can. So from January to about early March, I read 4 books. One of those is including Kingdom of Ash in the Throne of Glass series, so that definitely took a long time. But I'm not going to be reviewing that in this video just because there's so much that I could get into, and I just feel like it would be maybe better for another video. It's almost overwhelming to like collect my thoughts about it because there was just so much. Like, the book was 1,000 pages long. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved the Throne of Glass series, but I was just a little bit disappointed by Kingdom of Ash. There was definitely some emotional moments in it, and I thought the writing of course was excellent, but I expected a little bit more of an emotional punch just from like the reviews I saw, but that's just my opinion. I think Queen of Shadows was the best book in the series. Let me know in the comments if you've read the series and what you thought of it, but overall I'd rate the series probably 4.5 stars. Alright, so I have all my notes on the books I've read so that my thoughts stay organized and really portray how I felt about them. So let's get into it. So the first book I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Why'd I say it like that? V.E. This is like a light fantasy, mostly fiction and some historical fiction in there as well. It's about this girl, Addie LaRue, who lives in France in the 1800s. She was just really unhappy with her life. She was being forced to marry a guy she didn't want to marry, and she was quite young at the time. And so she runs away, makes a deal with the darkness, and because of that deal, everyone that she encounters forgets that she exists or that they met her as soon as they look away. And so obviously that can lead to a very isolating, lonely life, and this book spans her life of about 300 years. So my first thoughts about this book were I do think it was overhyped. I think everyone on social media was hyping this up, and I love watching book reviews. If you watch me, you probably do watch Sarah Caroli. When I watched her read this book, I saw that this book made her sob, like cry and cry, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to know what is going on in this book. Like, it must be so good. Like, there were some really good quotes in this book, but I just did not get that emotional punch at all. Like, there was a little bit of sadness. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a cold stone rock. I don't know. I just was really expecting it to wreck me, and it didn't. Schwab's storytelling ability is very strong. I liked the idea of this book, and I thought it was a really unique plot because I really had never read anything like this before. Like, I loved reading about, how the curse affected her and the themes of isolation throughout the book, how a lack of connection can really lead to a lonely and sad life. Addie does go through a love interest at some point of the book, and I really did enjoy that. That's when it really started to pick up for me. Henry's character I felt was a lot more developed than Addie's. Like, 500 pages of a girl's 300-year life, and I just felt like she really didn't have much character development. There were points where historical events were brought up, and I really wanted to like dig into her experiences with those events, but the author would just glance right over that. That was what was really missing to me. Like, I felt like it was very lyrical writing, which I can appreciate, but it gets really old. 500 pages of just, I felt like describing the same thing over again. Like, I get it. being forgotten is horrible. I did read a theory that Schwab intentionally made Addie's character forgettable, just like her curse. But then that kind of made me think about how special the interactions between Addie and her love interest were, because he could get past that forgetfulness. I thought that was a cute touch. I also felt like Addie's character didn't have much of a personality. Like, she wasn't funny. Even if this was intentional, her character was so forgettable to me. Like, I barely remember her personality. Just a very somber, independent, kind of apathetic character, because that's what isolation does to a person. Now, the darkness character, his name was Luke. He was kind of a little bit of annoying to me. You'd think like a character like that would have a lot more depth on why they're so dark or what happened or, where he came from, but it just really fell flat for me. And he kept popping back into the story over and over again. And so, yeah, I just felt a little bit irritated as soon as I would realize he's about to come back into the picture and start stirring things up. I really did like the ending of this book. I was surprised. I didn't guess it. I think a lot of people had guessed it. And I really kind of started feeling confused on why Addie started falling for a certain character towards the end of the book. That's when I started to see Addie's true heart and intentions at the end of the book. So overall, I didn't get that emotional punch that I expected, but I still absolutely adored some of the quotes in here, and I thought the plot was really unique. So I thought I'd read a couple quotes. I actually highlighted them, but I did post some highlights from this book. So I'll go ahead and read a few quotes that stood out to me. What a luxury to tell one's story, to be read, remembered. He walks away to order, says something that makes the barista laugh, and lean forward like a flower to the sun. Little quotes like that were really unique to me about her writing style. I just thought what a cute description to describe a lure you feel towards someone. He may be a sun, but she is a shining comet, dragging their focus like burning meteors in her wake. Loved those. I really thought those stood out to me. So overall, enjoyed it. Wasn't my favorite. I rated it 3 stars. So I then listened to The Last of the Moon Girls by Barbara Davis. It's setting the scene for this book. So this was a fiction, magical realism / murder mystery. So an interesting mix. It's about Lizzie Moon. She's in her early 20s. She's trying to establish her career in New York City, and she's trying to move on from these events that happened in her hometown during her childhood at Moon Girl Farm, which was the farm that was passed on by many generations of Moon women. And when she finds out her grandmother Althea has passed, she has to come back to the farm and pretty much confront her anxieties and her anger and, figure out what she's going to do with the farm. And this isn't a typical farm. It's where they use nature for healing and medicine. They make tinctures and medicinal products to help people in their community. And I thought that was really sweet. They grew a bunch of herbs and stuff, and I thought, I love that type of stuff, so I was loving the vibe of this audiobook. The big scandal that had happened had caused a lot of people to gossip about her family and her grandmother, and pretty much look down upon them, so she really has a ton of animosity towards this town. She basically finds herself wanting to uncover this mystery, figure out what really happened to just clear her grandmother's name and move on from it all. She reconnects with a childhood friend who tries to help her on her quest. And throughout this journey, she finds that her grandmother has left a book of remembrances, basically these letters to Lizzie. It's a lot of wise advice, and is trying to teach Lizzie how to embrace her special gifts that the Moon Girls have all carried. That was one of my favorite parts in the book. I absolutely loved the letters. I thought they were so endearing and written beautifully. And I really thought that the Moon Girls' connection to nature and all of that was super interesting. I absolutely loved the metaphors to the moon throughout the book as well. But one thing that was really missing for me was when Lizzie starts to acquire this love interest, there were a lot of mentions of them having this connection in their childhood. Really wasn't written very much, and I really wanted to know what drew them to each other. And so I really felt like Barbara Davis missed the mark on that one because their love seemed a little bit confusing to me at times. Now, the murder mystery, I thought it definitely kept me interested in the book, and I was a little bit surprised by the reveal towards the end, but it did feel a little bit unrealistic. But it is a magical realism book, so maybe that's why, but it almost felt a little bit rushed. But I really loved the theme of this book and how Lizzie had to confront her past in order to make way for her future. There was a little bit of a Hallmark movie feeling to it, but Overall, I loved the vibe of the book. I thought it was like right up my alley with the nature and the moon and the love interest and a little bit of a mystery. So if you're into that, I think that would be a great cozy book to listen to or read. Barbara Davis is an excellent author. If you have not read The Echo of Old Books, that is one of my favorite books of all time. So overall, I rated this book 3 stars. All right, so I thought I'd do a little bit of a different background for the rest of these book reviews. So I read my first 5-star book this year, if not 6 stars, and that is The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. This is a historical fiction.
Got a mop underneath the couch.
This is a historical fiction novel about the female main character, Lenny. She's 13 years old when her family suddenly decides to move to Alaska. Her dad was a Vietnam War veteran and he was also a prisoner of war for 6 years. So as you can imagine, he had a lot of PTSD and a lot of mental illness that just was not talked about back then. He had inherited a plot of land and an old cabin in Alaska from a friend he met in the war, but who unfortunately passed. So basically, Lenny's father continues to be disgruntled about the state of the country, becomes really paranoid, and just wants to basically live off-grid in Alaska. The theme of mental illness was very prevalent in this book, and I thought Kristen Hanna did a really good job of portraying just untreated mental illness and the effects that it can have on, a family, how someone grows up, and also the people around them. During this time in America, it was pretty much the first time war was being broadcasted on the news. There was a lot of political unrest, a lot of protests. That was like the era of the hippies and, the pro-war people. So they eventually get to Alaska, and you basically start off with learning how rough their first winter was, the climate, the way Kristen Hanna portrays how scary and how prepared you actually had to be in a climate like this without electricity, running water, plumbing, barely like any grocery stores. You had to prepare all your food, grow it the season beforehand to be able to get through these harsh winters. It was really sweet to see the community come together and, try and help this family. Large Marge was a great side character, and she was one of my favorites in the entire book. So basically the story follows Lenny from ages 13 to about 25. Her learning how to survive, how to, deal with her parents' tumultuous relationship, her dad's unpredictable behaviors, alcoholism, experiencing her first love, and going to a new school with only about 10 kids. In my opinion, Kristen Hanna's storytelling abilities are just unmatched. I read The Four Winds by her last year. I also rated that 5 stars. And this one, oh my gosh, I just can't stop thinking about it. I felt like I was in the story with the characters, and at times I was so emotional that I actually shed a few tears, and that's really rare for me in a book. I just felt like I was right there with Lenny as she encountered so many obstacles and so much development, and the relationship between her and her mother really hit home to me. The way Kristen Hanna also describes how you feel in a first love, how it consumes your mind and how you start to feel all these new things and how intense it can be, and she just did a great job. I had never read like a first love type of storytelling like this one. This book is a true reminder of why I love reading so much. I felt like I learned so much about not only the climate and the harshness of Alaska, but the historical events that went on with the Vietnam War, what it's like for someone with untreated PTSD and lack of help for a mental illness. I rarely feel the emotions and connectedness that I felt towards these characters. Like reading all these 3, 2, even 4-star books are so worth it until you get to a book like this. I cannot recommend this book enough. Lenny was one of my favorite female main characters of all time. Just the way she took in the world and how resilient she was, how heartbreaking certain events that went on in her life and how she was able to keep moving forward, and it was just so heartwarming, and I just cannot recommend it enough. So 5 stars for The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. So the next book I read was The Crash by Frida McFadden. I read that on my Kindle. This was honestly one of the better books I had read by Frida. It wasn't the best thriller I've ever read, but basically it's a story about a 23-year-old woman who is pregnant, and she ends up going in the car during a winter blizzard in Maine to see her brother. She ends up, of course, getting in the crash. She's rescued by this couple that owns a cabin in rural Maine, and they basically keep her there until the storm lets up, and then, she can go to the hospital and get the help she needs. And then, of course, if you've read a Frida McFadden book, weird things start to happen, and she starts to realize how much danger her and her baby are in. So basically, it's a story about how she needs to summon the strength to save her life and her baby's life. All of like the creepy things that start to go on, and she starts to figure out over time. There were some twists and turns that I didn't see coming, but I do feel like the middle of this book got a little bit repetitive, which is a pattern I've noticed with McFadden's writing. Repetitiveness, simple, which can be good at times, but almost a little bit too simple. Sweet bee. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. I didn't guess the ending. I did see people on Goodreads did guess it. I'm not the best at guessing endings. One thing that really did annoy me in this book was the nickname that the female main character was giving to her baby. If I heard Little Tuna one more time, I don't know. I'm like, just name her. Name her! Overall, it was a good, quick read that definitely left me wanting more and more. I really wanted to see what was gonna happen. Don't expect to be super shocked or creeped out. Honestly, the ending was really good. I liked it. So 3 stars for Miss Fadden today. Miss Fadden, McFadden. There she is. The queen herself. Dagger's here too. She's a good boy. He's a good boy. So another audiobook I'd listened to in February was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I had heard so much about this book like growing up. I know it was made into a movie. I hadn't watched it. I really wanted to know what was the hype about this book. I had like over 3 million reviews on Goodreads, and it was available on Libby as an audiobook, so I was like, why not? And I wish I could get those 16 hours back, and I should have DNF'd this book when I wanted to, but I really thought it was going to be a shocking ending. But unfortunately, it was just a story about 2 narcissistic characters that are crazy and psycho to each other, and the ending was about as weird as the entire book. It's basically about this woman who disappears on the 5th anniversary of this, and it's basically about the evidence slowly unfolding through the point of view of the husband and the wife. You get like the background of their marriage, what was really going on, why she disappeared. Eventually the entire country starts to become invested in this story because it gets on the news and everybody is thinking it's the husband that did it. And there were definitely some shocking reveals, but I don't know, I just couldn't get past the ick that I felt throughout this entire book of how crazy these 2 people were. It really wasn't worth waiting for the ending reveal. And the ending pretty much revealed that they're pretty much as psycho as I thought they were. So I don't want to give this book too much of my time, but I rated this one 2 stars. Another audiobook I listened to was Where the Forest Meets the Stars. This is another magical realism fiction type book. Basically, the female main character loses her mother to breast cancer and also has her own struggles with it as well. And then she eventually gets to go back to grad school and finish her PhD doing bird nesting surveys and works as a wildlife biologist. While immersed in her work in this rural cabin in Illinois, this little girl shows up proclaiming she is an alien, and she shows up with bruises and torn clothes and she looks dirty, and every time the woman tries to call the police or get any information, the little girl like threatens to run away, and she even does a few times. So obviously this woman is very concerned about this little girl. She obviously knows she's not an alien, but it's honestly convincing throughout the book because it's magical realism. Like, I was like, no, she's an alien. The little girl was a very intelligent, interesting character. I'm not a huge fan of children being like the main focus of a book, but this one was honestly pretty good. She basically, says she was sent from the stars and she has to witness 5 miracles until she can go back to where she came from. The female main character has a love interest, and them 2 together are trying to figure out where this little girl came from and what her story was, while also forming a relationship with her and starting to get attached. I loved the inclusion of women in STEM in this book. That always hits home to me. The ending of this book did seem a little bit unrealistic, but it is magical realism, so I feel like that's a theme that I keep realizing in these types of books. Overall, it was a really sweet read about the power of healing oneself through connection and friends and how they can get you through a really tough time in your life. The cover of this book really stood out to me, and that's why I wanted to listen to it. I just thought, I was feeling the vibes of it. But overall, it was kind of like a forgettable story to me, and I rated this 3 stars. so I have not finished this book, but I am currently in the middle of Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. I'm about halfway through it, and honestly, I'm feeling a little bit bored. I almost DNF'd it at one point, but I just really wanted to keep going because I love the aspect of women in STEM. This was the first book I've read of hers, and I thought her writing was really intelligent, which definitely keeps me on my toes. Like, I feel like I'm constantly looking up what the meaning of some of these words are in this book. And Haley Pham was right. I mean, it's spicy, but you know what? I like it. So I'm definitely gonna keep going. I will probably review this in my next book review video. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I love doing these book videos. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed it and if you had read any of these books. If you're interested in learning about my autoimmune disease or the steps I take to live a healthy and balanced life, go ahead and check out some of those videos. I appreciate everyone who has subscribed. It means so much every time I see my subscriber count go up. Slowly and slowly, I'm making my way in this little YouTube community. So thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.